Good evening, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus, and as we're shut in, locked down, sheltering in place, looking for more and more interesting and Baroque ways to amuse ourselves and each other, Story Hour goes back to the oldest form of entertainment in human history, people sitting around the cave telling lies to each other. Each week, a guest author and I will spend an hour with you sharing our stories. That's it. No Q&A about where we get our ideas or how to start a writing group. There's nothing wrong with those questions. It's just not what we're doing here. There will be minimal self-promotion, although, we're writers after all, so you might have to expect a little bit of that. Each week, I'll also offer a very brief PSA about how you might help coronavirus relief efforts if you're fortunate enough to be in a position to do so. Note, with a minimum of fuss, we're going to get right to the goods. 2 writers, 30 minutes each, telling stories. The calendar for the next couple of months is at storyhour2020.com. And I gotta say, it's a great lineup. This week, I'm incredibly fortunate to have Eileen Gunn with me. I'll say a little more about her when I turn over the controls at the midway point, but she is a wonderful writer, a person of fierce intelligence, and I'm very grateful to have her help me launch this program. If you are fortunate enough to be in a position to help others during this crisis, what better way than to help kids in need who've missed millions of school meals during the closures? NoKidHungry.org helps schools and community groups find new ways to feed these kids. NoKidHungry.org. Thank you. So, I don't write a whole lot of comedy. My stories tend to be somewhat introspective. Some might even say a bit on the dark side. So the story I'm reading tonight is something of a departure for me. We've all got enough to worry about. I thought I'd start this reading series with a little fun. I had the title for this story for a couple of years before the story revealed itself. Then one day the story just sort of appeared full blown in my head, and all I had to do was get out of the way and write it down. It's kind of every writer's dream, right? So the story is called Jesus Christ Superstore. It will be appearing in the Iconoclash Review later this year. I should mention that there's some adult language, and as you might gather from the title, irreverence towards certain forms of religious worship. So please take note, send the kids off to watch SpongeBob, or do whatever you need to do. So here we go. Jesus Christ Superstore. It'll be the biggest goddamn Christian-themed super mall in the world, JT Stubbs said, balancing his formidable girth on the bar stool. His solid gold bolo tie clasp glittered in the dim light of the Plano Comfort Inn lounge. Smoke drifted in lazy eddies above the bar. Bursts of lubricious pedal steel and staccato drum fills issued from the front of the room as Bobby Ace and the Poker Chips set up for their sound check. Samudragupta Sharma, Sammy to his Western friends, looking out of place in his silk suit, the distinctive odor of deep money surrounding him like a pheromone mist, frowned slightly. He didn't much like this Stubbs fellow. Call me JT, everybody does. But he had a reputation for turning straw into gold on the flimsiest of conceits, and Sharma, having just sold Superior Fundamentals Incorporated, a Duluth-based truck body manufacturing company, to a consortium of Pakistani investors, was looking for a new tax dodge. Can Collin County really support a new Christian-themed supermall? You've got plenty of local retail. Well, that was an understatement. Since a Plano housewife had claimed to see the face of Jesus in a tuna casserole and posted the picture to Facebook, Bible stores, gun shops, and left behind survivalist gear merchants had sprung up in and around Plano like mushrooms after a spring rain. Sharma thought the tuna Jesus looked more like Jackson Browne, but the area's propensity for religious nuttery was undeniable. Exactly, said Stubbs. My point exactly. It's all about consolidation. One-stop salvation with convenient parking. We'll make it free for the first 6 months and start charging $2 an hour. His eyes glazed as he focused on a distant point beyond the bar mirror. He sighed and shook his head. We'll crush those indie sons of bitches like cockroaches. I talked the first fundamentalist into using the Cineplex for Sunday services. Boy, howdy, when we start charging for parking, he began ticking off his stubby fingers. We got a REI for the survivalists. TGI Fridays will have a Christian-only rock lineup. My brother-in-law, Billy Bob, owns the Bed Bath & Beyond franchise down in Eileen, and he's going to pop out a new one as soon as we get ink on the contract. Stubbs lowered his voice. I asked him to go a little easy on the Bath and Beyond and pump up the bed, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. He looked down at his fingers, splayed out like the blunt tines of a fork. A gold ring with a ruby setting encircled his middle finger. It looked like a link of chorizo, red and ready to burst. He raised the index finger of his other hand. And oh yeah, we're gonna run joint promos with the Six Flags Over Jesus theme park down in Red Bluff. Half off admission if you bring a Bible and a receipt from the Barnes and Noble. Sounds like you've thought of everything, Sharma said, at least until you run out of fingers. The poker chips launched into a lurking polka-side rendition of I Walk the Line, effectively drowning out whatever replies Stubbs might have made. The pounding bass induced sympathetic circular waves in Sharma's cranberry juice. Stubbs's glass was empty, which he sought to remedy immediately. Bartender, shouted Stubbs above the melodious din, waving a meaty hand in the air. The bartender, a lanky young man wearing a Western shirt, cowboy hat, handlebar mustache, was deep in conversation with a hooker at the other end of the bar. Barkeep, Stubbs shouted again. The bartender looked up, frowned, patted his friend on the hand, and ambled over to them. Can I get you? 2 more of the same, Stubbs said. Sharma put his hand over his juice glass. I'm good, he said. The bartender poured Stubbs a generous shot of Old Crow and retreated as the song ground to a stuttering halt. Stubbs turned to Sharma. What do you think? Sharma was silent. This was his favorite part of a deal, the pregnant pause, and he milked it without mercy. Stubbs downed his shot of bourbon and wiped a film of sweat from his forehead. I'm in, Sharma said finally. He was excited in spite of the small surge of depression he felt at giving this Nimrod what he wanted. Tentatively, I'm going to want names and video of the other investors, and I'll have my due diligence team look over the business plan and whatever architecture drawings you have at this time. If all goes well, you'll have a term sheet in 2 weeks. Stubbs was prone on a massage table in the back room of Daisy's Beauty and Nails on Division Street in Plano when his cell phone emitted the sound of a tinny synthesized calliope playing All My Exes Live in Texas. His pale body glistened with coconut oil as Mei Ling's tiny hands dug deep into his tender spots. She had just slid aside the towel draped over his gelatinous butt, and the good stuff wasn't far off. God damn it, this better be good. He lifted his head. Honey, I gotta take this. Grab my phone and hold up to my ear. That's a good girl. This better be good, he said again without looking at the caller ID. Stubbs, this is Sharma. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Stubbs' enthusiasm for the massage dwindled precipitously. Hey there, I know why you're calling, but it's all good. Construction's going gangbusters again. We had that little problem with the rebar quality, but I greased some palms of county and that's fine, Stubbs. I'm sure you've got the graft and corruption end of things well in hand. What I'm concerned about is marketing and strategic planning. You know, there's a competing effort that just broke ground outside of Houston. What, those guys? They don't even have a tune of Jesus. This is not the first rodeo I've attended, Stubbs. We have a head start, but we need a decisive opening, something really big. I want their investors skittish and desperate. If I can buy them out at a lowball valuation early in the game, we'll have a lock on the religious-themed mega mall market for the entire Southwest. This is the big league, Stubbs. Time to swing for the fences. Well, sure, but I want you to meet me at UT Austin this afternoon. There's a Cessna waiting for you at the Plano airport. Austin? Stubbs avoided Austin like vegetarian lasagna. He regarded the place as a fetid swamp, infested with intellectuals and queers. I'm sponsoring a project out of the physics department, Sharma said. I think it might be of interest to us. As Stubbs walked across the campus to his meeting with Sharma, he wondered if he'd made a mistake eschewing the benefits of higher education in favor of alcohol, cocaine, no-limit Texas Hold'em, and Catholic girls. It was late spring, muggy as a bog, and the campus was crawling with young, nubile women sporting plenty of skin. As a middle-aged, corpulent redneck, he was effectively invisible to anyone under 25, and he could ogle with impunity. The physics department was located in Robert Lee Moore Hall, a minimalist 12-story phallus towering over the technology ghetto on the north end of campus. It looked more like a Holiday Inn than any kind of hall. Sharma was waiting for him at the front entrance. He was wearing white linen slacks and a navy blue polo shirt. The crushing heat seemed to bother him not at all. "Let's go," he said. "You're late." He led Stubbs through a warren of hallways, through a heavy unmarked door, and down 3 flights of stairs. The air grew noticeably cooler as they descended. The bottom landing was illuminated by a bare 25-watt bulb. On the far wall, someone had painted a squat, hulking creature with a tentacled head and razor-sharp claws, belly pale and flaccid beneath a midriff t-shirt that read, "No, I won't fix your grand unified field theory." Sharma led Stubbs through another maze of hallways. In one room, he saw a student wielding a blowtorch perched atop something that looked like a diving bell. In another room, 2 students played speed chess surrounded by a litter of half-unpacked boxes of expensive-looking electronics gear. Each shouted, "Fuck you," at the other when they slammed their side of the clock. Finally, they arrived at a large open area in the back of the complex. An incomprehensible array of hardware occupied nearly half of the space, surrounding yet another diving bell. A scruffy, bearded student hunched near the structure, applying a soldering gun to a tangle of cables and circuit boards. Several others pecked away at a bank of terminals. Amidst the clutter stood a middle-aged man in a moth-eaten corduroy jacket. He had the worst haircut Stubbs had ever seen. His skull mottled with what looked like patches of mange, tufts of hair sticking out in all directions. Nevertheless, he had the bearing of a maestro conducting an orchestra. The air was thick with tension. Something was about to happen. Stubbs stepped forward, ready to start glad-handing. He regarded any gathering as an opportunity to sell somebody something they didn't need. Sharma stopped him with an extended arm. He shook his head, holding an index finger to his pursed lips for emphasis. "Wait," he mouthed silently. The professor looked at each of his students in turn, then nodded. One of the students at a terminal said, "Okay, here we go. On 3. 1. Is that on 3 or 3 then go?" said an attractive young woman in a boys suck t-shirt. "Fuck off, Darla. 1, 2, 3. A deep hum filled the room, almost below the threshold of hearing. The lights dimmed. Sharp pain flared in Stubbs' dental fillings. The air filled with an ozone reek. A bundle of wires and boxes next to the diving bell sizzled and burst into flame. The bearded student unhurriedly produced a fire extinguisher from somewhere and doused it. The professor spoke. He had a voice like a television announcer, deep and mellifluous. "I thought you put the accumulator behind a surge protector, Barlow. We can't build a new one each time." "Well, clearly we can," Darla said, "because we do." The professor glared at her. She shrugged. "I'm just saying." "Okay," Barlow said. "Who's hungry?" He spun a circular locking mechanism and the door swung open. Mist curled around the edges of the frame. The chamber was empty except for a large, flat, grease-stained box. The students flocked to it like roaches to a discarded donut. The professor turned to Sharma and Stubbs. "Sammy," he said, "glad you could come." He looked dubiously at Stubbs. Before Sharma could make an introduction, Stubbs stepped forward, holding his hand out. "Stubbs," he said, "call me JT. Everybody does." "I'm sure they do," the professor said, taking his hand for a brief moment, then dropping it like a hot biscuit. "This is Dr. Peskin," Sharma said. "His lab, his students." The students were clustered around the diving bell, gorging themselves on wedges of gooey, dripping pizza. Stubbs looked at Sharma. Sharma looked back with a slight smile. Figure it out, he seemed to be saying. So, what's that contraption? Stubbs asked. Some kind of fancy pizza oven? Peskin chuckled. Not exactly. That isn't just any pizza. It's an extra large jalapeno jack chorizo pizza from Ernesto's on the south side of campus. Something of a local legend, actually. Stubbs' beady eyes widened. You mean it's some kind of transporter deal like in Star Trek? Peskin turned to Sharma. He's not as stupid as he looks, is he? He has a certain naive cunning, Sharma said. Peskin looked back at Stubbs. No, not at all. The thing is, Ernesto's burned to the ground last year. Ernesto himself is currently serving 4 years at Huntsville for insurance fraud and arson. Stubbs looked at Peskin, at Sharma, back at Peskin. Nuh-uh, he said. No way. A time machine? Boy, howdy, you got yourself a time machine? Peskin shook his head. Not bad, but no, time travel is impossible. Entropy, second law, and all that. Stubbs nodded. He patted his jacket pocket. You mind if I smoke in here? I'll break your arm if you do, Peskin said mildly. Stubbs shrugged. He was used to a constant low level of hostility from pretty much everyone he met. Okay, I give up. What is it then? Peskin pushed his hands together in a steeple. He appeared to be collecting his thoughts. While they were talking, the students had drifted over from their feeding frenzy. Stubbs turned to Darla. Honey, you think you could scare me up a beer? That's a good girl. Bite my ass, fat boy, she said cheerfully. The other students snickered. Sharma tried to contain a smile. Peskin ignored the exchange. Our universe is just one of many, he said. If the meta-universe were an ocean, ours would be one of the googolplex of bubbles comprising the foam on its surface. You with me so far? You bet, Stubbs said, thoroughly lost. He elbowed Sharma. Googolplex, he whispered. Peskin glared briefly, then continued. The laws of physics are not invariant from one universe to the next. Fundamental constants have different values. Elements decay at different rates. Even the speed of light is not consistent. He seemed to be warming to his subject like a preacher to a particularly juicy manifestation of sin. In some of these universes, even the passage of time is different. 1,000,000 years here could be the blink of an eye there. Now back to our foam. Some of these bubbles are very close together, topologically speaking. That is, some of the universes are nearly identical. Minor details might differ. For example, there is a universe identical to ours in all respects, except there, the Knicks beat the Lakers every time. Barlow snorted. Yeah, right. That's off the continuum, Dr. P. Peskin shrugged. A singularity is a mathematical abstraction, Barlow. Barlow nodded sheepishly. Yeah, I guess. Some sort of Zen moment had passed between teacher and student, but as far as Stubbs was concerned, they were speaking in Mandarin. So what we're looking for, Stubbs, is a universe identical to ours, except that time passes at a different rate. Depending on what we're looking for, we find the universe with the appropriate rate differential, open a portal, and grab what we need. Huh, Stubbs said. So the extra large jalapeno jack chorizo pizza is from the universe where Ernesto's is 11 months behind ours, figuring from the Big Bang onwards. Big Bang. Stubbs thought of Mei Ling and was lost briefly in fleshy reverie. He pulled himself together. So what you're telling me is basically you got yourself a time machine. Peskin shrugged. Pretty much. Stubbs nodded, starting to see the possibilities. So tell me, Doc, you ever brought over any people? As a matter of fact, we have, Peskin said. One of the other students, a chunky fellow with a shaved head, Coke bottle glasses, and a tiny soul patch, spoke up. John Lennon, he said. Art school phase. Barlow laughed. What a douche. Word, Soul Patch said. He wouldn't shut up about himself. Me auntie tore up me fucking poems, Darla said in a passable Cockney lilt. Soul Patch nodded. Exactly. We gave him $100, my kid brother's Fender Squire, and put him on a bus to Nashville. He'll be fine. Nobody spoke for a long moment. We going to tell him about Hitler? Darla asked. Peskin coughed. Yes, well, most unfortunate. A favor for a friend in the psychology department, who you were boning at the time, Darla added. Peskin glared at her, then shrugged. Indeed. He shaved the mustache, stole from Dockers from the men's faculty locker room, and took off on his own. We're pretty sure he's the new director of consumer experience at Apple. Sharma winced. Oh boy, Stubbs said. He looked at Sharma. I'll tell you what, though, this brings up some interesting possibilities for opening day. It does indeed, Sharma said. The only people out in the open during a typical Indian summer afternoon in East Texas are drunks, meth dealers, and outlet shoppers. It's so hot you can grill quesadillas on the sidewalk. The humidity induces lizard brain panic that you're trying to breathe underwater. On opening day for the Tabernacle Mega Mall, a heavy sun beat down on 80 acres of substandard concrete and Chinese prefab. In spite of the inhuman conditions, the marketing blitz had attracted a respectable flock of rubes willing to scuttle from their air-conditioned muscle cars and pickups to the climate-controlled mall interior while newly poured parking lot asphalt threatened to suck the shoes off their feet. The tantalizing hints about a special guest had been especially effective. Who would it be? Devin Nunes? Ted Nugent? Brittany? Speculation was rampant. Stubbs was waiting for Sharma in the Tabernacle Mega Mall Security Operations Center. It looked like NASA ground control. Banks of monitors covered 2 walls. The others were floor-to-ceiling two-way mirrors that looked out over the mall's central commons. Half a dozen middle-aged men in mall security uniforms muttered into spidery headsets and hunched over keyboards. Many of the stores had set out booths and displays in the commons. The Gunn and Grog had tapped a keg of Lone Star, and a gaggle of patrons clustered unsteadily around the Glock table. Sharma entered the room and walked up to Stubbs. Nice crowd. Stubbs nodded distractedly. Yep. How's it going with our visitor? Sharma asked. I heard he came through kind of late, but that's all I know. Yeah, the egghead's had some trouble with the gizmo. First try brought back a ton of sand and half a camel. Messy as all get out. Sharma winced. Yeah, you got it. They cleaned everything up and tried again, and this time it came through all right. Guy was wearing a filthy burlap toga and smelled like ass. He took one look around and started screaming like a little girl. We tried to get him into a shower. That wigged him out even worse until he got used to it. Then we couldn't get him out. Got him into an all-white tracksuit from the Sport Authority, and he's looking pretty sharp. Yeah, you got it. I tell you. In spite of him being a bit skittish and all, there's something about the guy. He's the genuine article, all right. Glad to hear it, Stubbs. What are we going to do with him in the program? Well, we're going to keep him pumped full of Valium, welcome him to Set Texas, do a little meet and greet with the crowd, laying on of hands, that sort of thing, then get him out of there before he starts screaming again. Works for me. They were set up in Theater 6 at the Cineplex. Stadium seating, IMAX sound, and a decent backstage area. Stubbs looked out from the wings to a packed house. Baby strollers dotted the aisles. The big room was filled with the white noise static of many conversations, like a huge swarm of sleepy bees, punctuated by the occasional Texas holler. Behind the main curtains, a shortish, thin man with shoulder-length hair and a hawk-like nose sat hunched on a wooden stool. Next to him, a small table held a glass of water. He seemed calm enough, muttering to himself and glaring at Stubbs from time to time. Sharma appeared at Stubbs' elbow. We ready? Yeah, pretty much. Stubbs nodded to the tech, a pimply teen with 5-day head stubble and huge dangling crucifix earrings. Kill the house lights, open the curtains, then hit the spotlight on cue, just like we practiced. Ready, steady, go. The theater plunged into darkness. The curtain whispered open. After a chorus of gasps, the house fell silent. There was a long, pregnant 3-count. Then the silky, ebullient voice of the announcer filled the room. Stubbs had hired Hurricane Bob, the weather guy from KBUG Houston, for his reassuring coverage of natural disasters. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Here to bless the grand opening of Plano's Tabernacle Mega Mall, let's give a big Texas welcome to the man with the plan, your favorite carpenter, Jesus Christ. A single spotlight beamed down from the ceiling, bathing the seated Jesus in bright white light. Stubbs had run the house fog machine for 2 minutes, just enough so that the spotlight beam was a solid bar of illumination, widening slightly from ceiling to floor. It looked like it was shining down directly from heaven. The tracksuit was a glowing nimbus. The crowd seemed stunned. A ripple of applause began, faltered, then caught hold, filling the room. Jesus stood up and took a sip of water. The house fell silent again. He looked out into the crowd, shielding his eyes. Then he began to speak. His voice was liquid, hypnotizing. Stubbs couldn't understand a single word. God knows how to work a room, I'll give him that, Stubbs whispered to Sharma. Sure wish I knew what he was saying. You're not telling me you didn't think to get a translator, Sharma said. How was I supposed to know? The Bible's in English, ain't it? Sharma fixed him with a long stare and then shook his head. Forget it, Stubbs. He paused, listening. I think it's Aramaic, which was a Hebrew dialect. It might be close enough to the modern. We have to know what he's saying. Jesus talks Jew? Come on, Sammy, you're yanking my crank here. He took note of Sharma's expression. No, I guess you're not. Jesus was becoming more animated, emphasizing his words with sharp hand gestures. Well, hold on now, Stubbs said. I know a Jew, guy over in Houston. Maybe he can help. He pulled out his cell, scrolled until he found the number, then jabbed the display and held the phone to his ear. Hey, Ira, this is JT. Yeah, Stubbs. No, I'm just fine. How? Well, hey, now, I told you that's a long-term investment. We got to line up distribution, marketing. Yeah, like I told your lawyer, boy, we got at least a 2-year horizon. Yep. Stubbs was listening, nodding, then noticed Sharma's glare. So, hey, Ira, the reason for my call, you talk Jew, right? Yeah, Hebrew, that's what I meant. I got a situation here. I could use some translating. Yeah, hang on. I'm going to put you on speaker. Stubbs held the phone out in the direction of the stage. And there was a pause. Then Ira's tinny voice issued from the phone. Wow, he said. Wow. Where'd you get this guy? He's hopping mad. That don't matter, Stubbs said. He's a stand-up act I'm looking to invest in. What's he saying? The phrasing is a little weird, and there's some words I don't understand. Well, that's okay, Ira. Just give me the ballpark. Okay. You sons of bitches. You effing sons of bitches. Why have you brought me here, you defilers of camels? I will ravish your wives, daughters, and camels with my tremendous phallus of camel. You whores, you painted whores and malformed sons of whores. It just goes on like that. Whew, boy, Stubbs said. We have to get him out of here, Sharma said. Thank Ganesh the Plano Jew giraffe had triplets. That pretty much dominates the local media coverage. Otherwise, we'd be crawling with TV crews and we'd be really sunk. Thanks, Ira, Stubbs said into the phone. I'll call you in a couple of days about that other thing. He jabbed the keypad and slipped the phone into his pocket. He turned to the stage crew. All right, people, we got ourselves a code 2. Kick it into gear right now. 5 seconds later, the house lights went out and the sound cut off. A security team hustled the struggling Jesus off the pitch dark stage. He shouted a little more, then he went limp and began to sob. The house lights came back and Hurricane Bob's oily voice filled the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a small technical problem. We'll be back in just a moment. Thank you for your patience. Jeers and catcalls issued from the crowd. Stubbs turned to a shadowy figure standing in the wings. Okay, big fella, you're on. The man stepped into the light, standing about 6'2", pushing 300 pounds. He would have been an imposing figure even without the sequin jacket, oversized sunglasses, and jet black pompadour. He held a vintage Gibson J200 by the neck. Inlaid mother of pearl roses covered the deck of the guitar, throwing rainbow highlights. It looked like a ukulele in his meaty hand. He staggered a bit as he walked forward. You okay? Stubbs asked. Yeah, the man said. I just threw up a little bit for a second. I'll be fine. All right then, give him hell. Sharma looked at Stubbs with something resembling respect as the opening bars of Heartbreak Hotel reverberated in the auditorium. Well done, he said. Stubbs shrugged. My daddy was a hard man, Sammy. Barely gave me the time of day, and he died drunk in an oil rig fire when I was 12, but there's one thing he taught me. What's that? Sharma asked. Always have a backup plan. In the Tabernacle Mega Mall Security Operations Center, huddled on a mattress in the back of a detention cell, Jesus wept.
Do we clap? I'm the only audience that has sound.
Right. Thank you. So yeah, thanks. That was fun.
There's a clap. There's a chat clap.
Cool. My co-host today is Eileen Gunn. Excuse me, I'm fiddling with the controls here to give her co-host privileges. My co-host today is Eileen Gunn. Over the last 3 decades, Eileen has been amassing a distinguished body of work, including the 2004 Nebula Award-winning short story, Coming to Terms. She has authored 2 short story collections, Stable Strategies and Others, and Questionable Practices. In one of her stories called Fellow Americans, Richard Nixon becomes the host of a game show, which I think is kind of an inverted prescience to where we are today. In addition to her Nebula, she's won the Sense of Gender Award and been nominated for the Hugo Award twice, the James Tiptree Jr. Award, and the World Fantasy Award. She's also been very active in service to the science fiction community, having served on the board of directors of the Clarion West Writers Workshop for 22 years, and currently serving on the Locus Foundation Board of Directors. So, Eileen, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Dan. This is a story that's in the April 2019 issue of Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. It's called Terrible Trudy on the Lam, and it's based, however obliquely, on a true story. It was a whim, a momentary desire to see what lay outside the zoo. But once Trudy had taken a walk around San Diego, once she'd tasted freedom, she was determined not to go back. She would make this work. At first, she lived in the city's lovely dark storm drains, emerging every night to forage for yummies in Balboa Park. But she knew her Sylvan idol would not last forever. She needed a long-term plan, and after a week of pondering the matter, she put one together. A job was the first order of business, something that would keep her in shoots and leaves, and hopefully something she could do evenings. She was, of course, as the zookeepers had told her time and time again, an odd-toed crepuscular ungulate. Twilight was her very best time of day, although she could go all night if she had to. She considered roller skating. Bears do it, elephants do it, even penguins roller skate. And at that time, roller skating couples in evening dress were becoming a popular nightclub entertainment. Why not tapers? At first, Trudy thought maybe a prey-predator act would be exciting, since tapirs have been known to bite viciously when cornered, and that could be milked for laughs. But tigers, the Malayan tapir's principal predator, rarely roller skate well. They consider it undignified, and often when strapped into skates, tigers just lie on their backs with their feet in the air, as if expecting a belly rub. Trudy considered putting together an act with another prey animal, but she was wary of partners. Not every roller skater who said she was a vegetarian was committed to nonviolence. In the end, Trudy decided to go it alone. A kindly shoemaker created custom open-toed roller skates for her to show off her tiny hooved toes, 3 on each back foot, 4 on each foot in the front. The boots were made of red leather, which contrasted elegantly with Trudy's silver shoulders and black flanks. A black bow tie and a starched white collar pulled the whole ensemble together in a dignified and professional way. A refined Marlene Dietrich look, Trudy thought, right to the silver tracing on the tips of her ears. She practiced skating late at night after the rink had closed and everyone had gone home. It was dark, but tapers have poor eyesight, and she was accustomed to tiptoeing around in a dusky forest. Eventually, the groundskeeper discovered that she had broken into the rink through an unused storage closet, and the jig was up. But by then, she had perfected a hilarious pantomime routine. She skittered out onto the dance floor, flailing about and threatening to crash into tables along its edge, then regaining her composure and performing a series of graceful loops and twirls, ending in an axel, double mapes, Euler double flip. Audiences loved it. In performance, the finale always drew gasps from the tables, and they took Trudy to their hearts. San Diegans, grieving and distressed after the attack on Pearl Harbor the previous year, sought consolation in bars and supper clubs, and terrible Trudy the roller skating taper was a hit. Hollywood celebrities flocked to San Diego, ostensibly to perform for the troops at the naval base, but really to catch Trudy's act at the Chi-Chi's Supper Club, a hot new nightclub with the South Seas theme. Trudy sometimes added a lei to her costume. It also served as a midnight snack. As Trudy's star rose, so did her worries about the zoo director, the indomitable Belle Benchley. Mrs. Benchley had pioneered the modern, natural-looking, cageless zoo. Trudy had rejected Benchley's carefully simulated enclosure, and Trudy's wanderlust had challenged the woman to the core. Mrs. Benchley knew Trudy was living in La Jolla and working openly at the Chi-Chi Club, but had made no effort to contact her. How long would this détente last? At first, Trudy seemed to be nonchalance itself. She flirted with members of the audience of any gender who caught her eye. If an object or an article of clothing attracted her interest, she would take possession of it, although she usually returned it to the owner at the end of her set. In such a fashion, she acquired a fedora, and she instantly made it a permanent part of her act. A huge fan of the singer Jimmy Durante, Trudy interspersed her spectacular skating routine with Durante imitations, just as Durante would pause in the middle of a song and break into a quick comedy routine, then return to the song as if nothing had happened. Turns out she was a very affecting singer with a sense of comedic timing that rivaled Durante's own. Not to mention she had a schnozola that even Durante envied. The crowds went wild, but the stress began to tell on Trudy, who knew that at any moment Mrs. Benchley could, on a whim, decide to bring Trudy back to the zoo in its fake Malayan rainforest. Trudy had no legal leg to stand on, as she had been reminded by her lawyers time and again. She was the property of the San Diego Zoo. Trudy began downing a quick Tonga punch, or maybe two, before the show just to keep her courage up. One evening, she went a bit too far and had not sobered up by showtime. She went on anyway, rather than disappoint the crowd, and the revelers took her markedly sloppy routine as a clever commentary on the club MC, who is notorious for never showing up to work sober. People laughed and laughed, and their wild reception of her wacky skate dance encouraged her to act out even more. She was careening between the supper tables on one foot, waving the other three in the air, picking up customers' champagne glasses with her schnoz, and singing Inca Dinka Doo, when suddenly her luck ran out and her wheels caught on a crack in the floor. Had she been sober and standing on all 4 feet, she could have recovered, but that was not the case. Trudy went flying and landed on top of a table occupied by William Randolph Hearst and his paramour, Marion Davies. Drenched in expensive champagne, Miss Davies fled the nightclub, leaving behind her ermine evening wrap and Mr. Hearst. As the newspapers told the story, Mr. Hearst immediately bestowed the ermine on Trudy to console her for her embarrassment. Miss Davies later publicly vowed never again to leave either her clothing or her man alone in Trudy's presence, declaring, "That little rhinoceros minx has an elevated opinion of her own attractiveness." Here we must acknowledge that although tapirs and rhinoceroses are among the few odd-toed ungulates, tapirs are not rhinoceroses, and neither of them are minks. Trudy, realizing that her career as a headliner at the Chi-Chi had come to an end, saluted the audience with her fedora ad-libbed Durante's signature closing, "Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are," and lit out for LA as fast as she could travel, just one step ahead of Mrs. Benchley. She was only a taper, making her lonely way in this dreadful world, but she knew when to call it a night. It took just a couple hours to bus from San Diego to Los Angeles, and by midnight, Trudy, clutching her ermine stole about her, emerged from the Greyhound station on Los Angeles Street. She knew that pretty soon she'd need some kind of fake ID, but right then she sure hoped the cops wouldn't stop an innocent-looking young taper in a classy fur wrap. The few passengers on the late-night bus from San Diego scattered like roaches when you turn on the light. It was a quiet night, just a few people napped on the station's benches. No street traffic at all, really. Trudy was alone in LA and had no real idea where to go. She was pretty sure that LA had storm drains and that the gardens of Beverly Hills would provide sustenance. She was also under the impression that Beverly Hills was somewhere north of the Greyhound station, which was true enough. She struck out at once, heading north toward Alvera Street, and what she had heard were some of the most colorful sections of the city. The wind was off the ocean, and she could smell the salt air. After just a few blocks, she left the dreary bus station shabby street and entered a neighborhood of trim little wooden bungalows. It smelled good. It smelled edible, in fact. Maybe she should have a noche, she thought. Why hold out for Beverly Hills? She reached for some greenery and was nibbling it delicately when she noticed a man in the shadows, crouched next to a 1937 Oldsmobile. The streetlights were dim and one to a block, but Trudy's eyesight was best in low light situations, so she had no problem picking him out. He was wearing a crumpled serge suit with an ugly striped tie that had slipped askew. His fedora was battered in a way that suggested he habitually sat on it. A pint of something alcoholic stuck out of his jacket pocket. He looked slightly dangerous and unmistakably up to no good. Trudy caught his eye. He raised his eyebrows, nodded to Trudy, and cool as a frozen daiquiri, brought his left index finger to his lips and gave her a stern, cautionary glance. She nodded slightly in return. She would give him a chance to explain himself, she thought. Then suddenly he leaped up, holding a huge flash camera in both hands, and aimed it into the backseat of the Olds, photographing the car's interior. The flash lit up the scene, and a high-pitched scream came from the car. The photographer broke away, ran like hell down the driveway next to Trudy, and disappeared into a large privet hedge that Trudy had been considering for dessert. The driver's side door of the Olds pushed open, and a partly dressed guy leaped out, clutching a wrench. He spotted Trudy and shouted, "Where'd he go?" Trudy didn't care to be addressed so rudely. She gestured towards Beverly Hills, and he started down the street a few yards, then stopped. He turned around and came back to the car, buttoning his yellow and pink Hawaiian shirt with a truculent look on his face. "Get your things, babe," he said to the person inside. "I'll take you home, and then I'll deal with the gumshoe." A woman said something low and muley, but Trudy couldn't make out what it was. "I'll pay him off, that's what. I'll take care of him. Don't worry about it." He leaped into the car, started it, threw it in gear, and they clattered off down the street. Trudy made her move on the privet, which was as tasty as she thought it would be. The blackmailer, for that's surely what he was, emerged from the hedge. "They gone?" He kept his voice low and he mumbled. Trudy, her mouth full of fresh privet, simply nodded. "I like a dame that can keep her mouth shut," the man said. He held out his hands. "Name's he said. Trudy nodded again. That couldn't be his name, she knew, but it was really hard to understand him. No matter, she ignored his hand and continued to chew the privet. "Divorce case," he said, tilting his head towards where the Olds had been parked. He lowered his hand. "That mug's been out with a different floozy every night. His old lady'll take him for every penny he's got." Trudy just looked at him. "Not a blackmailer, a PI. "You keep your own counsel, I can tell," said the man. Trudy continued to keep her own counsel. "You need a job, kid? You look hard up wandering around the middle of the night, eating people's shrubbery." It was clear to Trudy that either he hadn't noticed the ermine stole or he thought it was part of a taper's standard equipment. But the question and the man's concern softened her reserve. She nodded her head vigorously. "I could use an assistant. Someone who keeps their mouth shut, you know what I mean? Trudy shrugged, but didn't deny that, yes, she could keep her mouth shut. I'm a private dick, and I do mean private. He spoke a little louder, a little more clearly, but I could use a dame to handle surveillance. You over 18? Trudy nodded again, although actually she was only 5. Seemed about right though, just past adolescence. Well, come along then, Jalopi's over here. I gotta get these pics developed. Lady's gonna be filing for divorce, needs a flagrante delicto. I don't want to be somebody's assistant, thought Trudy. I want to be the detective. I want to find the flagrante delictos, but I guess I'll deal with that later. She followed Vert Mumble to his car. And that was how Trudy happened to be in the front room of the detective's office later that night, filling out an application for a PI license when the irate adulterer came by with a shotgun. She saw his blurred form through the pebbled glass panel in the office door, and she recognized his pink and yellow shirt as the one the guy who had driven off in the Olds just a few hours before. Trudy was pretty sure that whatever her job turned out to be, some of it would involve running interference when people with whom the private eye had dealt in a professional capacity dropped by to discuss matters. So she put down her pencil and waited for the knock. The knock, it turned out, was the crash of the butt end of a shotgun coming through the pebbled glass. Trudy dashed forward, heedless of flying shards. The visitor aimed the shotgun directly into the PI's private office. Trudy reached over with her prehensile proboscis and pulled down hard on the barrel. The gun went off and sent a load of buckshot through the open office door and right into the front of the detective's desk. Trudy pressed her attack, making low-pitched, hollow grunts and emphasizing them with piercing whistles. She tilted her head back and waggled her long phallic snout, raising it like an elephant's trunk to reveal, deep behind her huge fleshy lips, a set of choppers as blunt and massive as those of a horse. She gave the man an emphatic bite on the arm, then reached over with her snout and grabbed the shotgun right out of his hands. The guy let it go. He seemed to have lost interest in it completely and was staring at Trudy in complete disbelief. The detective appeared at the door to his office, and his would-be assailant turned to him with a look of helpless appeal. If that's a dog, it's the weirdest damn dog I've ever seen. What the hell is it? My little sister. You got a problem? The detective took the gun from Trudy and stashed it behind his desk. Your sister? It's got horse feet for toes, and it's wearing fur spats. It looks like 2 different animals put together, a white one in the front and a black one in the back. He seemed on the verge of hysteria. You know, Buster, you look like you were put together but from spare parts yourself. I don't think you ought to be insulting my sister's protective coloration. May I inquire as to the purpose of your visit? Trudy was surprised and pleased to hear the gumshoe defend her like that. She had thought he wasn't any too thrilled to be told that she wanted to be a detective. In her experience, men did not take kindly to females of any persuasion who aspired to their jobs. Perhaps this one was different. Give me the negs, said the miscreant. You know what's good for you. You give me them right now. You're not in a great position to make demands, buddy, said the detective. You want the cops can make you a set of prints suitable for framing. The man leaped for the shotgun, but the quick-witted gumshoe kicked it away. Then the fellow pulled a knife. Unarmed and taken by surprise, the detective grabbed an office chair and raised it to keep his attacker at a distance. But it was clear to Trudy that he was not going to win a fight against a thug with a knife. She looked about for a weapon, or at least something she could grab and throw. Her eye fell upon her ermine stole. It was fluffy and soft and white, a garment that made her feel like the cutest bunny in the world. But she knew that ermine were basically weasels in white coats, vicious. The stole would distract the knife-wielding adulterer, perhaps tapping into an atavistic human fear of the weasel. Trudy grabbed the stole with her snout and waved it as if teasing a bull to get the intruder's attention. He looked up and stared at her in baffled panic. What was the beast doing now? Trudy flung the stole at the intruder, and it wrapped fuzzily around his head like a flying squirrel. The detective quickly picked up the shotgun and hit the knife out of the panicked miscreant's hand. 5 minutes later, the fellow was neatly trussed and tied to the chair, and Trudy, wrapped again in ermine, sat with her new boss on the wooden anteroom bench, awaiting the arrival of Detective Lieutenant Breeze. The detective poured them each a shot of Old Forester. "You got it, kid," he said, tipping his glass towards her. "You're cool-headed, aware of your surroundings, and deft at improvised distraction. I'll see that your PI certificate is approved." He downed his glass and poured another one. "You've got a job here with me as long as you want it, if you don't mind occasional gunplay." Trudy thought about it. She knew there would come a day when she would flee the dark, cynical world of the ELA gumshoe, just as she had fled the sleepy San Diego Zoo and the tacky Ritz of the Chi-Chi Club. It might well involve gunplay and hot pursuit, and that was okay with her. The thing you want when you're a prey animal, Trudy thought, is intermittent excitement. She could have a decent, happy life as the occasional target of someone's violent intentions, because she loved the pure energy of being chased. She bore no malice towards those pursuing her, and her heart soared at every triumphant escape. She wondered if Mumble, whatever his name was, who like most detectives lived for the chase, would understand. Maybe she'd ask him sometime, but not now. Trudy nodded to Furret Mumble and took a sip of bourbon. She smiled a hidden taper smile. Mrs. Benchley might yet track her down, but for the time being, she had escaped. And she had a job. Life was good. Now there is an author's note at the end. Terrible Trudy was a resident of the San Diego Zoo in the 1940s and 50s. Her escapes caught the popular imagination, but eventually Zoo Director Bell Benchley tracked her down and persuaded her to return and stay put. Trudy died of comfortable old age in 1959 in retirement at a rainforest habitat in the San Diego Zoo. Mrs. Benchley, influential in her advocacy of humane animal habitats for zoos, followed in 1972. The end.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that.
It's fun to read.
And what a great pair of stories to kick this off. You know, I thought they were...
That story pissed me off, bro.
What?
I didn't get anything. I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. It's the first event, and I think there may be still a few bugs in the system.
Yeah, I'm going to rethink the waiting room thing, because I think there's a lot of people who came in a few minutes late and were just hanging out in the waiting room, and I was reading, so I couldn't let them in. So I'm going to have to rethink that. But we also had a lot of people streaming on Facebook as well. So if you had any problems with the audio, please let me know via the website storyhour2020.com, and I'll try and iron them out. Meanwhile, thank you, Eileen. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone, for showing up.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us for the launch of Story Hour.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on storyhour2020.com for updates.
No, fuck you.
Next week, we've got Nebula Award winner Vylar Kaftan, and I'm really looking forward to that. So stay safe, take care of yourselves and each other, and good night.
Good night.